The Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighter is an instantly recognizable icon of World War II, a unique, sleek, twin-engine fighter that saw combat from 1942 to 1945, just 3 short years. By war's end, the P-38 and other piston-engine fighters were superseded by jets including Lockheed's own P-80 Shooting Star. In the age of warbird restorations, the relative scarcity and novelty of the P-38 combines with its performance and aesthetics to make it a crowd favorite. The P-38 was Lockheed's response to a 1937 Air Corps requirement for a fighter that could attain 360 miles an hour at 20,000 feet. The Lockheed team believed that 2 engines were needed to meet those performance requirements. Lockheed looked at several configurations before picking the now legendary form of the P-38, using 2 long booms and a central fuselage pod mated to an aesthetically tapering wing. The fuselage housed differing arrays of machine guns and cannons over the evolution of the P-38. The guns did not need fire interrupters and did not need to converge at a fixed point ahead of the aircraft, as did the widely spread wing guns on single-engine fighters. The majority of P-38 models flew with 1 20mm cannon and 4 50 caliber machine guns in the slender-nosed compartment. The P-38 had its staunch proponents as well as its detractors during its production and operational life. Of the big 3 Army Air Forces fighters of the war, fewer P-38s were built than either P-47s or P-51s. That may have been simple budgetary math. At its lowest cost, a shiny new P-38 was priced at $97,147 in 1944. A P-51 came in at around only $51,000, and the lowest price for a P-47 was $85,578. Or the total number of P-38s bought by the Army Air Forces may have been influenced by its inherently more complicated logistics chain, with 2 opposite-turning engines to service instead of 1 power plant for the other fighters. The P-38 Lightning pioneered high-altitude, long-endurance missions. There were some early issues with turbo superchargers, their intercoolers, and possibly even the quality of gasoline they consumed in some theaters. Design changes addressed those issues. And the phenomenon of compressibility, in which fighters could become unmaneuverable in high-speed dives from great altitudes, beset P-38s and then P-47s and P-51s as they came online. Lockheed's fix for getting P-38s out of the clutches of compressibility was an ingenious dive flap that pushed out from the underside of the wing far enough to affect boundary layer air and thus resulted in more controllable outcomes from fast dives at altitude. A draft of a P-38 technical article written in 1944 by Lockheed acknowledged great serendipity in the fighter's original design. Lockheed created the XP-38 to meet a specific Air Corps requirement for high speed and high altitude performance. Only later did it become apparent this big twin-engine airframe was inherently adaptable to other missions. At various times in the war, P-38s could be found in England, North Africa, Italy, the South Pacific, the Aleutian Islands, and the China-Burma-India theater of operations. The original XP-38 first flew on January 27, 1939. It was a hand-built prototype that quickly convinced the Air Corps it had sufficient merit for further orders. Although the XP-38 was lost in a landing mishap, it set the stage for 13 YP-38s that were designed for mass production standards. The XP-38's propellers rotated inward at the top of their arcs, one to the right and one to the left. This necessitated propellers and engines that turned in opposite directions. Lockheed quickly determined better airflow over the tail could be had if the propellers rotated outward at the top of their arcs, so production P-38s were built that way. As the likelihood of global war grew, orders were placed for production P-38s without further prefix or suffix letters. This soon changed to become the P-38D, a production model that had a slightly revised horizontal stabilizer incidence to ease buffeting. Self-sealing gas tanks, vital to combat aircraft, were introduced on the D model, which was the first Lightning in combat. A big 37mm cannon plus 50 caliber machine guns filled the nose. Other iterative design steps led to the P-38E with a 20mm cannon augmenting the 50 caliber nose guns, and then the P-38F of 1942 as production hit a good stride. The P-38F overcame a deficiency of some early Air Corps fighters when it introduced pylons and shackles that could carry bombs or, more importantly, long-range gas tanks. During production of P-38Fs, a modification to the Fowler flaps allowed a maneuvering flap setting in which partial extension of the flaps gave the Lightning greater combat maneuverability. G-model Lightnings introduced some equipment changes. The P-38H featured further equipment changes and an increase in pylon carrying capability. The most visible change in the Lightning series came with the P-38J when deeper cooling inlets altered the frontal appearance of the Lightning for the rest of the production run. During J-model production, Lockheed innovated hydraulically boosted aileron controls to alleviate a perceived difficulty in achieving maximum roll rate in combat. Remaining production versions were the P-38L with uprated engines and the P-38M, a glossy black night fighter variant with a radar pod and a jump seat for the radar operator behind and higher than the pilot. Adaptations to the P-38 during the war included Droop Snoot, a version with a bombardier station in a modified nose for level bombing using the Norden bomb sight. Other P-38s carried elongated noses with radar for use as Pathfinder reconnaissance aircraft, making radar images of target sites that were generally superior to those made by bombers during a bomb run, according to a 15th Air Force report. P-38s proved they could tow gliders, if only in tests. And with a special plexiglass nose, some P-38 drop tanks were modified as emergency carriers for litter patients or others requiring airlift. A special subset of Lockheed Lightnings are the approximately 1,400 F-4 and F-5 photo reconnaissance aircraft. In that era, the letter F denoted photo. The first F-4s derived from the P-38E design. Later F-4s and F-5s evolved from other models of the Lightning fighter. Photo Lightnings were widely used. Their altitude, range, and speed capabilities were assets for this mission. In the post-war world, civilian-owned Lightnings were employed as photo mapping aircraft. P-322 was the nomenclature applied to 143 Lockheed Lightnings originally built for Great Britain, but retained by the Army Air Forces. These Lightnings were made without turbo-superchargers, limiting their performance. Initially, they had engines both rotating in the same direction. Some were modified with opposite rotation. P-322s served as stateside trainers in the Army Air Forces. Take a look at these well-restored P-38s on the airshow circuit.
our P-38s makes a crash landing. The pilot was rescued from the flames by a communications officer.
In the winter of 1944-45, GIs chopped ice and snow from aircraft and used a captured German Kettenkrad tracked vehicle with a plow to remove snow from the field. This is Airfield A-94, which was quickly built by the Army Air Forces in France about 160 miles east of Paris. By 20 September 1944, it had a 5,000-foot grass runway, later enhanced with pierced steel planking. By November, the field was improved sufficiently to host fighters, medium bombers, and reconnaissance aircraft. On some of the P-38s, squadron code F5 indicates the 428th Fighter Squadron. 7Y is 429th Fighter Squadron. 7F indicates 485th Fighter Squadron, all from 9th Air Force. Some of the Lightnings in the snow are photo reconnaissance aircraft, visible for their lack of guns and for camera windows in the nose.